A few years ago, this image almost broke the internet. A package of pears grown in Argentina, packed in Thailand, and sold to consumers in the United States for just a few dollars. Which led pretty much everyone who saw this picture to say, why the hell would you do that? On first blush, it seems outrageously impractical, if not wasteful. But the three-continent journey of this fruit cup isn't even the weirdest part of the story. The weirdest part of the story is that stuff like this is making all of us wealthier. If you were trying to identify the biggest ways the world has changed in the past 50 years or so, one of the places you'd have to start is international trade. In 1968, only about 20% of the world's economic activity came from trade between countries. By 2022, that number had reached 63%, and we've got the stuff to prove it. An average American might wake up in the morning on a Chinese mattress, pour themselves a cup of Colombian coffee, hop into their Japanese car, and pull up to an office where they'll sit in front of a computer made in Mexico. And while we don't know what happens after work, it probably involves Cuba and Scotland. Now, the good news about this explosion of international trade is that it's made us a lot better off. As of 2022, it was estimated that America's increasing participation in global trade in the years since World War II has made the country about 10% wealthier than it otherwise would have been, which sounds like a modest number until you realize that 10% comes out to over $2.5 trillion. But there's bad news too, which is that none of us understands how any of this works, and we're kind of pissed off about it. International trade isn't exactly popular lately, and while economists, who overwhelmingly think freer trade is good for the economy, are driven crazy by this, you can kind of understand where the skepticism comes from. After all, how can sending money to other countries make us wealthier? And why on earth are we importing things like Canadian lumber, Mexican tomatoes, and Saudi oil when we already have all those resources right here in the US? Let's start with the easiest cases. Some products we have to import just because we don't have enough of them here. America uses 8,000 tons a year of cobalt, the metal used for batteries in laptops, smartphones, and electric vehicles, but only produces 300 tons of it a year. In most of the country, the climate makes it impossible to grow vanilla, so we import about 3/4 of our supply from Madagascar. Hawaii is the only American state that grows coffee, but the total it produces is only about 0.1% of the amount of coffee Americans actually consume. Cut off those imports, and you're probably looking at a second American Revolution. Where this gets a little more complicated is when you start talking about things that we could produce here, but don't. For instance, bananas are the most popular fruit in the United States. We eat over 26 pounds per person per year. Hopefully not all in one sitting. How many of those bananas are homegrown? About 1%. The rest come from places like Guatemala, Ecuador, and Costa Rica. Now, could we produce more bananas here in the US? Sure. While much of the country doesn't have the right climate, banana production is viable in a few places like Hawaii and Florida. So, why isn't anybody doing it? Because it doesn't make any economic sense for us. The land it would require is being used for more profitable crops, and the workers it would require are all working jobs that pay better than growing bananas would. Which means everybody involved is better off if we're making more money by growing citrus in Florida and spending a tiny fraction of it to buy those bananas from abroad. And this principle, which economists refer to as comparative advantage, turns out to be the secret to understanding global trade. Put as simply as possible, comparative advantage is the idea that what matters isn't just how good you are at doing something. It isn't even how good you are relative to the other people doing that thing. It's how good you are relative to everything else you could be doing. And perhaps the clearest example of this doesn't come from agriculture or technology. It comes from the world of sports.
Jordan to the circle, puts the shot in the air. Good! The game's over!
In 1993, Michael Jordan was already arguably the greatest player in the history of basketball. Though he wasn't even 30, he had already led the Chicago Bulls to 3 consecutive NBA championships and won the NBA's MVP award 3 times. And then he gave it all up to play minor league baseball, at which he was pretty good. And by pretty good, we mean that his manager said that if he really tried hard, someday he could make it to the major leagues as a backup. As a minor league baseball player, Jordan was making $850 a month. Within a few years, he was back in the NBA, making over $30 million a year. Because Michael Jordan was a good, borderline professional level baseball player, but an amazing, once-in-a-lifetime basketball player. And this is how the broader economy works. Businesses and entrepreneurs all around the world succeed when they're doing what they're best at relative to their other options. And the more they specialize, the more time and talent they devote to often hyper-specific skill sets, the better they get. Which brings us back to our fruit cup. Argentina turns out to be exceptionally good at growing pears. They're the world's second largest producer of them. Thailand happens to specialize in fruit packing, and the US has mastered the logistics necessary to efficiently and affordably move these things around the globe. Put all those factors together, and you get a world where those pears can cross the Pacific twice and still be on your grocery shelf for just a few dollars. And as we look around the economy, we see that this kind of specialization is everywhere. For an incredibly improbable example, consider Nutella. How hard could it be to make? Well, the hazelnut comes from Turkey, the palm oil comes from Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, and Brazil, the cocoa comes from Ivory Coast, Ghana, Nigeria, and Ecuador, the sugar comes from Europe, and the vanilla flavoring comes from America. It's produced in factories on 5 continents, and the company is headquartered in Luxembourg, which produces none of this stuff. And the result of going all around the world to find the people who are the best at their craft is products that are higher quality or lower priced than they'd otherwise be. In fact, it's estimated that because this increased competition drives down prices, expanded trade has saved the average American household over $18,000, with those benefits disproportionately going to the lowest income families. And this is why most economists say it doesn't make much sense to try to make everything ourselves, or to worry about the resulting trade deficit, the difference between how much we export to other countries and how much we import from them. Because the reality is that the whole idea of trade between countries is just kind of a metaphor. In the real world, international trade isn't 2 countries' governments shipping a bunch of goods to each other. It's millions of individuals in those countries freely choosing what they want to buy from overseas. Do you feel exploited when you buy a bottle of French wine? Or a flat screen assembled in Mexico? Or a North Korean iPad? Okay, don't answer the last one. Bottom line, yes, everything about how global trade works is a little counterintuitive. But once you understand comparative advantage, you realize that all of this stuff happens for a reason. It's an incredible formula for increasing wealth, improving products, and raising standards of living throughout the world. And if nothing else, it's the only reason America has enough coffee. Shouldn't have tried this in Boston, guys. It's a Dunkin' town.